Hey, welcome to the Connected Mom Podcast, where we have real conversations that are hopefully helping you to connect more deeply with God, more empathetically with your fellow moms, and more intentionally with your child. I am Becky Harling, your host, and I am really excited about today's conversation. And so before we get into that, and before I introduce our guests, I want to ask you a question. When was the last time you felt overwhelmed? Yeah, I can hear you sighing. Some of you felt overwhelmed this morning as you got kids in the car to send them back for school. Some of you felt overwhelmed last night as you looked at the overwhelming pile of laundry and all the mismatched socks. What happens to those socks? I don't know. They just disappear, right? Some of you are overwhelmed because you're trying to keep up with work and home and relationships and jobs and all the things. And I get it. I understand. And so does today's guest. She is the author of Overwhelmed Mom. And I'm guessing many of you need to lean in today and really listen. My guest today is Jamie Erickson. She's the mom of 5 kids. So if nothing else qualifies her to write about being an overwhelmed mom, I think that does, right? I mean, 5 kids, that can feel a little overwhelming. She is a homeschool mom. She's an author of several books, including Holy Hodge. She is the author of the blog The Unlikely Homeschool, and she's the host of the Mom to Mom podcast. Welcome, Jamie. It's wonderful to have you with us.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, okay, begin by telling us about your family. Because, I mean, every mom out there that's now listening are wondering, okay, what does she know about being overwhelmed? She's not in my world. So tell us.
Yeah. And I think overwhelm is kind of universal. So even if your circumstance is different from mine, I'm sure we have a lot of overlap in our overwhelm. I am Jamie Erickson. I've been married to my husband for 23, almost 24 years now. We do have 5 kids, 2 of whom have launched and are out into the world doing adultish things. And we still have...
Well done.
Yes, it's so delightful to see them stepping into their God-given talents and stepping out in boldness in our decaying culture with faith and just a love for Jesus and a love for others. We still have 3 at home. The oldest of that pack is a senior this year. And then I have another in high school and another in middle school. So amongst all 5 of them, there was an 8-year age gap. And sometimes that felt really close and a lot. And other times I've been very thankful for that tight amount of years that we've had with them.
Yes. Well, that's amazing. Are they girls or boys or what?
The oldest is a girl and the rest are boys. And we often joke that we have 1 daughter and she has 4 staff members because they just dote on her and love to do whatever she asks of them.
That's amazing. Usually when the girl is the oldest, she becomes a bit of a second mama to everybody, and so that's always interesting, you know. So as a mom of 5 kids, and you have homeschooled, is that correct?
Yes, I was
all the way through.
Yes. Yep, I was a teacher in the classroom for about 7 years, and then when I had my own kids, I pulled them out to homeschool them from the very beginning.
Okay, yeah. So homeschooling, that's a whole thing, right? I mean, you got to be fairly organized, and you know, how did that go for you?
Well, I actually think that's a bit of a misnomer. I know many homeschool moms who would not call themselves organized. I think I tend to have some handholds that I put in place, some routines and traditions that we do from year to year that help me. I'm certainly not a type A person, but I think that God meets you with grace every single day if you're willing to hold your hands out to him. So can I say that every single day we've had in the last 18 years of homeschooling has been smooth without any bumps? No, but God has walked along the road with us every single step of the way.
Yeah. So, okay, why do you think moms today are so overwhelmed? I mean, I talk with a lot of moms, and I hear the word, I'm so overwhelmed, in almost every conversation. It's rare that I meet a mom who doesn't feel a sense of being overwhelmed. Where does that sense of overwhelm come from, and what does it feel like from your perspective?
Well, I actually think overwhelm, like I said, is universal, but it's also timeless, meaning I think mothers as far back as Eve in the garden, when they walked out of the garden and somewhere along the way they had a baby, I feel like overwhelm has laced all of our days. And it's because of three reasons. And I think you can see this, again, all the way back to Eve. I think women are overwhelmed when they compare themselves to others and they look to what their friend is doing, what that total stranger on Instagram is doing, what their neighbor is doing, and the responsibilities that those women have and the blessings that they have in their life. And so we as women begin to grab for all of those things. We're like Eve reaching for superlatives. Good is not good enough. We want better and best. So we reach for what other women are doing and add it to our pile when maybe that is not what God intended for us to have. So I think that's one of the reasons that we're overwhelmed, is that we're adding way too much to our lives that God never intended to be there. I think sometimes, and this might sting a little bit, sometimes we're overwhelmed because we are apathetic in the job that God has given us as mothers. We see the task that needs to be done, but we'd rather be doing this thing over here. And so that task spirals and gets bigger. It avalanches and gets bigger until we just kind of sit in apathetic overwhelm and we don't even know how to tackle this big task because we've let it stir so long. So sometimes I think our overwhelm is self-inflicted when we do not work steadfastly and faithfully in the job that God has given us. And then lastly, I think that there are moments of very acute overwhelm that women want to solve, fix, get done all by themselves. And those are things that only God can do. But because we, like Eve, don't just want to be like God, we want to be God. We want to fix and correct and problem solve our way out of everything that maybe was just meant for God's hands.
Yeah, and we can't control things. And I think touching on control is huge for women who are feeling overwhelmed, because I think that's a very female tendency. I mean, I think guys struggle with, trying to control things too, but perhaps in a different way than we do as moms. So can you share a personal story where you felt overwhelmed, what that looked like in your life, what that felt like, and what you did about it?
Well, actually, at the very start of this book, when I was kind of under a time clock to start writing, it was 2022. And that year was, I would say, one of the most overwhelming years in my entire adult life. I'm a firm believer that God will never give me a message to deliver that he doesn't also want me to live first. And so that year, when I started writing this book, here are a handful of the things that happened in my life. My husband is self-employed. He runs his own business from home. And one of his two largest clients decided, for whatever reason, to withdraw their work with him. And that sent our finances in a tailspin for about 6 months. My mother, who was suffering with a deteriorating memory due to dementia, began to spiral down that road even faster and further, and that left myself and my sisters kind of scrambling to care for her, even though we had our own families to care for. My son was getting ready to head off into the military to serve in great, bold, kind of scary ways. My sister, who felt like a mother to me for most of my adult life, passed away, and I had to make my way across the country to deliver the eulogy at her funeral. We bought a vehicle, a new to us used vehicle, to be able to make that trip because we only had one vehicle at the time. We purchased that vehicle. We made our way all the way across the country for that funeral, came home, and within less than 2 months, my husband hit a deer with that car, and it was completely totaled. And the insurance wasn't going to give us our full amount for the car, so we took about a $5,000 loss. So it seemed like, yes, every year of my life has been, sprinkled with overwhelm, but that particular year felt different. It felt very overwhelming. All the while, I'm writing a book about overwhelm. But here's what I learned in that year. That was an acute season of overwhelm. But so many of those things were out of my control. I could not control the cancer diagnosis of my sister. I could not control my mother's dementia diagnosis. I couldn't control, deer jumping out in front of my husband's car. None of those things were within my control. But what I did begin to see is that there were some things in my life, if I put together some habits and rhythms and practices, that were within my power to control. And if I could get a handhold on those things, then that would free me up and alleviate some of the stressors in order to sit with these other things a little bit better, these other things that I couldn't control. So yes, all of our days are going to be overwhelming. And yes, there are just going to be some things that you as a mom, as a wife, as a child of God cannot actually fix or problem solve your way out of. But God does call us to be steadfast. It's a fruit of the Spirit. God does call us to be faithful with the tasks that he's given us. So I am a firm believer that if we can do that with the elements that we are able to, then when overwhelming things do happen to us that are outside of our control, they will feel less overwhelming because we will have a little bit more of a grasp on all the other pieces of our lives.
Yeah, and so I love that. I love that you touched on the things that were overwhelming that are out of our control, because in all of our lives, God's going to allow a measure of hard things. He says that. I mean, Jesus says, in this world you will have troubles, but don't worry because I've overcome the world. So, we are going to have trials and things. How can a woman set, or a mom, how can she set some boundaries around parts of her life, like let's say there are unexpected things like you've experienced, where things feel very overwhelming, circumstances feel overwhelming, and she's walking through a hard time. And what part does boundaries play, personal boundaries, in helping her not feel overwhelmed?
Yeah, well, I first want to address what you were sharing, that passage in John where it says, in this world you will have trouble. I just want to encourage a woman who's listening who feels very overwhelmed. Sometimes we want to orchestrate our lives to get rid of any pain point. We don't want to sit in hard. We don't want to sit in hurts and pains. But don't self-help your way out of something that maybe God has brought to your life in order that you would see your need for him. In the hard moments of my life, I can look back and see, man, I drew closer to God in those seasons. I prayed more fervently. I was attuned to his word and listening to his still small voice because I had nothing else. And what a merciful gift that was in the midst of all that hard, that I was able to draw closer to him because I had nothing else. So let's not try to wish or pray or fix and cure all the hard parts out of our lives, as difficult as that is to say. And nobody wants to be the one to ask. I'm not going to ask for hard things, but I also want to see them for what they are. Sometimes they are a mercy of God to draw us to himself. But to your question, boundaries are very important. And I would say, in my book, I talk about figuring out what God's purposes and plans are for your life, and the people and places he wants you to serve and serve in. And then with that in mind, be willing to boldly say no to the rest, realizing you can't do it all. You are not everything. Only God is everything. So if you can, for years we've been talking about like an 80-20 rule. If you can orchestrate 80%, fill 80% of your day with something, but leave the rest, the 20% alone, so that when interruptions do arise, when chaos does begin to spiral, when you do feel overwhelmed by an outside of your control circumstances, you have a little bit of buffer in your day so that it doesn't become overwhelming. I think the 80-20 rule is a good goal, a good aim to shoot for. Some of us, I'm thinking specifically of like single moms, might not have that luxury, but do the very best you can to say no to the things that are not yours to say no to, or yours to say yes to. I'm a high capacity person, so I could easily say, oh, you're asking me to do that thing over there? Sure, I guess I can do it. And I continue to fill my days with more and more things. But the reason I often say yes is my pride. Because I think, I guess nobody else can fill that role. I can do it, so I guess I will. Because if I don't say yes, the wheels are going to fall off the whole thing. So I better say yes. Well, that's just pride. Maybe that wasn't my yes to give. Maybe in saying no, that's actually the kindest thing I can say. And I'll give you an example of that. A couple years ago, my family and I serve at a soup kitchen once a month, and it's an organization run by our local church. And one of the leaders had to step away for a time. So I was asked to take on the role of coordinating the meals, stocking the shelves, take on more of an administrative role. And could I do that? Yeah, I think I could have done all of the things, all the tasks that were required of that particular position. But I knew that I was getting stretched pretty thin with the daily responsibilities I already had said yes to. So I began to pray about it, which I think is the very first thing you should always do when asked to do something. And I began to call upon God to give me wisdom about this particular task. I knew it was a great ministry. It was a good thing. But I had to ask myself, what is it my good thing to do? Did God want me to do it? And at the end of the day, I thought, I'm doing good to be able to go once a month and serve and help in that capacity. I don't know if I say yes to this thing, if I would eventually become so overwhelmed that I would end every service time with tears and frustration because I had taken on too much. And then I'm putting all of my frustration and anger and guilt onto the ministry. And now I'm not doing it with a heart of service. I'm all of a sudden doing it in anger. So I began to think about that and think, if I say yes to this thing, is it going to end in tears and venom every time I have to serve? So I had a conviction in my heart. Nope, Jamie, this is not your yes to give. You're going to say no, trusting that if this is a ministry God wants to continue, He will bring someone else. He will provide a way. He will part the waters. And so I said, I'm sorry, I can't take this on at this time. I'm still willing to serve, but I cannot be in an administrative position. And within just a couple of weeks, another woman who was a retired nurse joined our ministry there. And she said, I would love to take on that position of organizing and administrating. See, if I had said yes, there would have been no room for her yes. In my pride, had I said, I guess I'm the only one who could do this, I would have left no room for her.
I think it's an important principle for moms, for you moms that are listening, to understand where your limits are and to understand what God has called you to and what He hasn't called you to, And sometimes I think as moms, when we say no, we're tempted to over-explain. And I like to encourage women to say the sweet no without an explanation. I go back to Mark 1 where Jesus, the disciples come to Jesus and they're all wiggy, like everybody's looking for you. Where have you been? And Jesus just says, let's go to the next town, and He doesn't give an explanation. He doesn't give a long drawn out reason, but He sets a clear boundary, like, this is why I've come. And I think we have to understand that, because if you're pushing past your boundaries all the time, you're going to be exhausted and you're going to lose the joy of motherhood, and it's not going to go well. So one of the things you also talk about in the book is living in your particular season. So there's a lot of seasons of motherhood, right? There's the toddler season, the diaper season, the early childhood season, the season of elementary school and junior high and high school and college and launching them, and then seasons of grandparenting. And what does it look like for a mom to embrace her particular season, and how does that help her not feel overwhelmed?
I think one of Satan's biggest tricks for a mother is to want her to live in the places she cannot change. And those two places are the past and the future. I have no control about what happened then. I have no control, very little control about what will happen someday. God has me right here, right now. And I think sometimes as moms, we look to those two seasons, the past and the future, with, wishful longing. And like when I had little ones, it was really easy for me to say, oh, well, when they get old enough to watch themselves and I don't have to hire a babysitter, won't it be great when they can finally go to the bathroom by themselves? Won't it be lovely when they can feed themselves? And I looked to the future instead of fully appreciating this point in time right here, right now. And now as a mom with kids who are launching, I've launched 2 and then the other 3 are, the end is in sight. I have about 5 more years left with my kids at home. I could easily look back and say, oh, I miss those days. I miss the days when they looked to me for all the things. And so I think moms are prone to looking back and looking forward. And God wants us to look right here. Boundaries, we can look to boundaries, the boundaries of our time, our season of life, and feel like they're constricting us, feel like they're hemming us in. When I had littles, I could easily say, well, I want to serve on that board at church. I want to write a book. I want to do X, Y, Z. And then I began to look at my children as if they're an occupational hazard, as if they are prohibiting me from doing this great grand thing. We look out there and say the good work, the most important work is out there. But really it's right here, right in front of us. And so I feel like when you're living in your season, you see your season as a boundary and not as a constricting, hemming me in, but really as a protection of keeping the world out, meaning this is the portion that God has given me. These are the lot lines, as scripture says, that I'm given right here, right now. And I don't just want to survive them. I want to thrive in them. I want to embrace and appreciate the season that God has me in right now and not bring the cares and concerns of those other seasons then and someday into this right now. I think that is another reason why we can easily become overwhelmed as moms, because we bring the cares, concerns, patterns, habits of yesterday into today, or we think about the cares and concerns of tomorrow and we carry them today.
Yeah, there's real beauty in learning to live a contented life. Like, this is where I am right now, and I'm going to live this day to the fullest for Jesus Christ. No matter if you're a working mom, a mom at home sending kids off to school, if you're a mom that's homeschooling, just learning to cultivate and enjoy the season you're in is huge. Okay, so let me ask you this. Let's talk about connecting with other moms and why that's so important to helping us not feel overwhelmed.
I think a natural byproduct of our Western culture is where we have lots of technology, we have industrial progress. I think a lot of the byproduct of that has been our isolation. Meaning, it used to be, let's say 50 years ago, if you were a mom living 50 years ago and your child suddenly developed a rash on his belly, what would you do?
You would go to your other moms and then your doctor. You wouldn't go to WebMD.
Right, exactly. That's exactly right. You'd go next door to the elderly woman who lives next door. Or you'd go to your church and, show the rash to some trusted friends. And you had this natural social capital built up of women linking arms side by side, but also women who were further on the journey who could look back at you and say, yeah, the way is sometimes difficult, but it's worth it. And then you were tasked to do the same to women just a few steps behind you. And so we had this lovely relational capital. Now we have technology. Like you said, you could go to WebMD and never have to actually talk to a live human person. Also, when you have a physical need, most of us have very few actual physical needs. And what I mean by that is if I'm throwing a party, let's say I'm throwing a baby shower for a friend and I don't have a punch bowl. Well, I could just go down to Walmart and buy one. Years ago, you'd have to turn to a neighbor and say, hey, can I borrow your punch bowl? And so you're building these relational through lines. This, what I like to say is like the lineage of faith that we have as women. And now that we have technology and we have industrial progress, those through lines have been cut and severed. And we don't have that intergenerational connections as moms, that support system, that lifeblood that women through the ages have had. And some of that is self-inflicted. It's looking to experts online who, some of the advice is great. And I know I have been in seasons, even like 60 years ago when I moved to a different town and I didn't really know anybody yet. It was great to be able to go online. What a gift that was to like type in something and get an answer. But when that's all the community I have, what happens is I might be able to ask a question, but I'm not actually guaranteed an answer. I might see what a woman online is doing, but she's not showing me what she's not getting done. And so these curated online images that we have made for ourselves really do add to our overwhelm because they remove our personal relationships and that sort of like Titus 2 woman in our life.
Yeah, and even friends in the same season as you. Before we went online, I shared with you about a dear friend who you happen to know, who we prayed together, and motherhood is not meant to be a journey that you do alone, friends. So you need your good friends in it with you. You need people who you can say, hey, my child is really struggling right now. Would you pray? And you can pray for their kids as well because we need each other. So we're almost out of time, but I really want you to share, like for a woman who's been listening and she's like, okay, I'm just overwhelmed and I don't even know where to start. What are 2 or 3 tips that she can do right now to help her get out of feeling overwhelmed?
Well, first and foremost, and I know this is a very countercultural suggestion and it might make you bristle to hear it, I would say try to analog as much of your life as possible. Meaning, I know, I'm on the internet now too, and I see we're getting ready to start school. I see all the ads for those digital calendars that hang on the wall, and they're connected to your phone, they're connected to your laptop. They might look flashy and shiny, but I will say that those things, research has showed us, anytime you put your life on a screen, your life gets sucked. Time gets stolen from you because you might say, oh, I'm just going to check my calendar on my phone or that digital wall calendar. But then you see a bathing suit online that, oh, I want to look at that. Maybe I want to buy it. Or you see the party announcement for a wedding shower that you're invited to. Or you see, your neighbor's having a yard sale. You go to Pinterest. Your time gets sucked and you actually end up spending 20 to 30 minutes more than you had expected because you don't realize how much time you're actually wasting. Research shows us that most women spend about 4 hours just on their phones. And when you do the math, that's 24 hours a week that we are losing to someone else's purposes, someone else's agenda. We are staring at other people's children online instead of looking at our own. So analog your life whenever possible. Be the person who takes out her paper and pen calendar. Be the person who has old-time recipe cards instead of going online to an app. Analog as much as you can, and you will win back many more moments in your days than you ever thought possible. So that's my first tip. And then the second tip, especially as we're heading into the school year, heading into a fall rhythm and schedule, I would suggest you take just 10, 15 minutes to make a list of what I like to call 10-minute power tasks that you can do, so that when you have 10 minutes, maybe you're standing in line at the post office, maybe it's 10 minutes before you have to leave to pick up your kid from soccer. You have 10-minute little chunks, pockets in the day. Instead of reaching for your phone to scroll, you have a list of 10 to 12 things that you could do instead that will be more productive. Because you see, overwhelm is not going to be tackled in big, grandiose ways. You're not going to be able to overhaul your whole life today, but you can overhaul 10 minutes. And if you can tackle a 10-minute task and check that off your plate, it will be like an avalanche to your schedule, because you'll be able to tackle the next thing and then the next thing. So as soon as you get off listening to this podcast, as soon as you push power off on your phone or whatever, go and make a 10 to 12 list of things that you can do in 10 minutes and keep that with you, so that in those 10-minute pockets of the day, you can actually tackle something in a productive way and not a...
That is great. I love that. And we are out of time. But I want you to be able to connect with Jamie, go online and get her book, or buy her book, Overwhelmed Mom, wherever Christian books are sold. I'm sure you can get it at Barnes & Noble's, moodypublishers.com, probably Amazon. So buy the book, maybe go through it with a friend and talk about, okay, what could we both do to be a little less overwhelmed in this season? And then I hope you'll connect with Jamie online. Jamie, what's your website?
It's jamieerickson.com.
Okay, we'll have that in the show notes for you. And hey, I want to thank you for joining us today. And I want you to remember, God is for you. He's not against you. And He is cheering for you as you try to parent these kids that you've been given. And He is really wildly in love with you, friend. So on the days that you're overwhelmed, I want you to pause for a minute and just say, thank you, Lord Jesus, that you are for me and that you are with me. That's where we're going to close today. Thank you for joining us today. And I hope you'll join us again next week for another episode of the Connected Mom Podcast. And hey, if you liked this episode today, would you recommend it to a friend? And make sure you're following us so that you never miss another episode. Thanks for joining us.